The wine glasses clinked. Smiles danced around the table. Then his mother stood, lifted her flute, and said, "To the woman we all still consider part of this family, Alana." I sat there frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth, as they toasted his ex-girlfriend at our anniversary dinner. My husband didn't stop them. He didn't even blink. That night, I didn't cry. I watched. And then I quietly began rewriting the ending to their little story. My name is Serena Wolf. I'm 34, a former literature professor turned independent book editor. I married into the kind of family people pretend to admire, polished, privileged, and perfect on the surface. The Wolfs were old money, well-mannered, country club royalty. My husband, Nathaniel, was their golden boy. I wasn't one of them. I never pretended to be. I wore flats to dinner when stilettos were expected. I preferred libraries to luncheons. And I wasn't Alana, the ex everyone still worshipped like a saint. She was everything they thought I should have been. I thought love would be enough. I thought marriage meant choosing each other. But that night, when they raised a glass to his past and left me invisible, I realized I wasn't part of their table. I was just a placeholder. Until I reminded them who I really was. It was our 3rd anniversary dinner. A small gathering. Just family. The kind of evening I had finally grown numb to: polished silver, white orchids, those suffocating conversations about trust funds, and who vacationed where. We were seated at his parents' estate, long mahogany table, chandeliers casting gold light over porcelain dishes. His mother, Evelyn Wolf, had orchestrated every inch of the evening, down to the napkin folds. She'd never liked me. Not outwardly, of course. Evelyn was too elegant for direct cruelty. But her disdain lived in the details, the way she'd always forget I was vegetarian, or how she introduced me as Nathaniel's wife and never by my name. That night felt no different. Until it did. I wore a navy blue silk dress Nathaniel had given me the year before. It was simple, timeless, something I thought Evelyn might approve of. Foolish of me to still care. As we finished the main course, herb-crusted lamb for everyone but me, who had been served some awkward attempt at grilled zucchini, the lights dimmed, and Evelyn stood. "Before dessert," she said, her voice lifting above the low hum of conversation, "I'd like to offer a toast." Nathaniel smiled. I prepared myself for something painfully polite. But instead, she raised her glass and said, "To Alana, for being part of our family in ways that time cannot erase." There was a soft gasp from one of the cousins. A pause. Then Nathaniel's uncle chuckled, lifted his own glass, and echoed, "To Alana." One by one, the rest joined in. His father. His cousins. Even Nathaniel. My husband. He didn't look at me. Didn't hesitate. He just drank. And I sat there, glass untouched, lips frozen in a polite smile that cracked at the edges. No one noticed. Or if they did, they pretended not to. Alana had been gone for 5 years. She'd left Nathaniel after turning down his proposal, choosing some diplomatic role in Geneva over a life in Boston. She was smart, poised, photogenic. She had that classic sheen that made everyone think she belonged in a magazine. Or in their family. I'd always known they still held a torch for her. But I never thought they'd torch me with it. When dessert arrived, a 3-tiered lemon cake I couldn't stomach, I excused myself. I went to the powder room, shut the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. Something inside me shifted. Not cracked. Clicked. The way a puzzle piece falls into place after too many years of trying to make it fit. They had never accepted me. And I had bent again and again, hoping one day they would. But standing in that marble bathroom, with Evelyn's perfectly embroidered hand towels and 2 white orchids framing my reflection, I felt it. Enough. Enough pretending. Enough shrinking. Enough waiting to be invited into a family that still set a seat for a ghost. Back at the table I smiled. Politely. Perfectly. And I watched. I watched how Nathaniel leaned in when Evelyn spoke. How he never once looked at me during the toast. How he laughed just a little louder when they talked about Alana's recent humanitarian award. It wasn't just his family that had betrayed me. It was him. And The worst part? He didn't even realize it. That night in the car ride home, he said nothing. We drove in silence, city lights slicing through the windows. I stared out, hand folded in my lap, the ring on my finger heavier than it had ever been. Only when we pulled into our driveway did he speak. I know that toast was awkward. Awkward? I turned to him. You didn't stop them. She's just an old friend. It was the moment. You toasted her, Nathaniel. You lifted your glass and toasted the woman you almost married. At our anniversary dinner. He ran a hand through his hair. You're overreacting. Ah. The classic defense. When a woman expresses pain, make her feel crazy for it. I stepped out of the car and walked inside. Quietly. No shouting. No drama. Because I knew something he didn't. You don't destroy porcelain with a hammer. You crack it quietly and let time finish the job. Over the next few weeks, I watched. I listened. I planned. Not for revenge, but for liberation. Because when someone tells you who they are, especially with a champagne toast, you believe them. And then you build your escape. Brick by careful brick. In the weeks that followed that dinner, I did not scream. I did not throw plates or demand apologies or collapse in sobs on the hardwood floors of our condo. No. I became silent. Still. A presence that watched everything. And Nathaniel? He barely noticed. He moved through our home like a man convinced everything was still intact, still orderly, still his. He kissed my cheek in the mornings, asked if I wanted oat milk in my coffee, commented on the weather, our neighbors' renovations, the traffic on Starrow Drive. But he never once said, I'm sorry, because he didn't think he needed to. I started keeping a notebook, not for anger, for clarity, a list. Of the dinners I wasn't invited to. Of the birthdays I spent alone while he traveled with his father. Of the photo albums where I was conveniently cropped out. Of every time Evelyn introduced me as the girl Nathaniel married, instead of her daughter-in-law. Every detail. Every insult dressed in pearls. I wasn't collecting proof. I was collecting permission. To walk away without guilt. One morning, while Nathaniel was at the gym, I sat on our balcony, journal in hand, coffee cooling by my elbow, and I whispered aloud something I had never dared to before. I don't think he loves me. Not really. Maybe he loved the idea of me. The stable, intelligent, well-mannered professor with just enough beauty to make his mother feel less embarrassed and just enough silence to make him feel unchallenged. But love, real love, the kind that protects you when no one else will? No. He didn't love me like that, because if he did, he never would have let them raise that toast. Alana resurfaced in our world 2 weeks later. Or maybe she never left. Her name popped up at a gala Nathaniel's firm was sponsoring. I wasn't invited, of course, but I saw the photos online. There she was, Alana in a crimson gown, glass in hand, smiling beside Nathaniel's parents. And beside her, Nathaniel, his hand on the small of her back. A casual touch, yes, but intimate, familiar. I stared at that photo for 10 long minutes. Then I shut the laptop and began to pack. Not bags. Plans. I reached out to our financial advisor. Quietly. Formally. Just updating some documents. I said with a smile in the meeting. Estate contingencies. Emergency planning. He didn't blink. Just handed me the papers. Nathaniel and I had a joint account. But I had my own too. Savings from my freelance clients. Royalties from the textbook I co-authored. Consulting fees that had never quite made it into the family conversation. Enough. More than enough. While Evelyn had been toasting ghosts, I'd been building an exit. One day, Gabrielle came to visit. My oldest friend. My truth teller. A woman with curls like wildfire and a laugh that cracked armor. She walked into the condo, saw my face, and immediately said, "What did the wolves do now?" I handed her the phone with the photo. She didn't even flinch. "I hate to say this," she said, "but you always looked like a guest in this marriage. Like you were waiting for someone to come ask for their seat back." "I know," I whispered. She looked at me, eyes burning. Do you want to burn it down? I didn't answer right away, but eventually I said, no. I want to walk away so quietly that when they finally notice I'm gone, it's too late. I changed the locks on my personal office, moved the important files to cloud drives, began transferring editing clients to a private firm I trusted.
And at night,
I cooked dinner, smiled politely, laughed when Nathaniel made jokes. Because when you are erasing yourself from a life someone built to trap you, you don't storm out the front door. You build a secret one. And when it's time, you walk through it with your head high. The last straw came on a rainy Tuesday. Nathaniel came home late from drinks with a colleague. He smelled like Alana's perfume. I knew it because Evelyn once gave her a signature scent from Paris, and at one brunch years ago, she made a point to say, "It's Alana's favorite." So classic. He collapsed into bed like nothing had happened. And in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and thought, I'm done. Not broken. Not angry. Just done. The next morning, I left a note on the counter. I've taken the weekend to visit Gabrielle. Don't call. Don't follow. Think hard about the woman you toasted. And ask yourself if she would have stayed silent like I did. I didn't go to Gabrielle's. I checked into a cottage on the Cape. By the ocean. Alone. I watched the waves. I read poetry. I let the salt air erase their names from my skin. 3 days later, Nathaniel texted, "Where are you? Can we talk?"
I didn't reply.
Because I wasn't sure I wanted to talk. I wanted to decide what kind of life I deserved, and who had proven they couldn't be trusted with it. The first morning in the cottage, I didn't set an alarm. The light filtered in slow and golden, touching the seafoam walls like a gentle whisper. No one was yelling for coffee. No one was correcting my posture at breakfast or mentioning how Alana used to play the cello at brunches. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I remembered myself. Not Serena Wolf, Nathaniel's wife. Just Serena. The woman who once spent hours reading Neruda by candlelight. The girl who painted sea glass on her window panes just to catch the sunrise in color. The woman who had lost herself so slowly, so politely, that no one noticed, not even her. But I noticed now, and I wasn't going back to the woman who let herself be erased. On the second day, I sat by the window with my journal and wrote. They toasted the woman he proposed to, not the woman who said yes. It made me laugh, and then cry, and then breathe, because it hit me like a cold wave to the chest. They were never mourning Alana. They were mourning the choice Nathaniel made. Choosing someone like me. Someone they couldn't display, like fine china. Someone who didn't belong in their curated fantasy of what a wolf wife should be. And I'd spent 3 years trying to fit their frame when I should have been building my own. That afternoon, Gabrielle called. "You're still alive, right?" she asked. "Barely," I joked. "But I think I'm coming back to life." She was silent for a second, then said, "Good. Because I just saw something, and you need to hear it from me." I sat up. What? They posted photos. From Nathaniel's father's birthday dinner. You weren't there, obviously.
No.
Alana was. Of course she was. They sat her next to Nathaniel.
A pause.
And Evelyn wrote in the caption, "Old friends, new memories." I didn't speak. Because I wasn't shocked. I was done. I put the phone down, walked outside, and let the sea air slap my cheeks. It was sharp.
Cold. Real.
I needed real. I needed truth. So I did something wild. I opened my email and sent this. To Evelyn Wolf. Subject. Thank you. Evelyn. Thank you for showing me who I never need to become. Thank you for the silence. The dismissals. The perfectly folded cruelty. And most of all, thank you for raising a son who taught me exactly what I will never tolerate again. I'm not Alana. I never was. But I was kind. I was loyal. And I was never once yours. That's the part you never forgave. Serena. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. Nathaniel called that evening.
Twice.
I ignored both. He texted. You're overreacting. Can we be adults? It was just a dinner. It was never just anything. That's what they never understood. It was always layered. The cutting comments, the erasures, the toasts. Every little thing built a staircase out of our marriage. And now I had climbed it. To the exit. I packed my bags the next morning. I returned to the condo only to collect the rest. I had already signed the lease for a studio apartment downtown.
Small.
Quiet.
Mine.
When I walked through the front door, Nathaniel was sitting at the table. Suit jacket off. Sleeves rolled up. As if we were just coming back from vacation. You look tired, he said. I didn't answer. He stood. We need to talk. I nodded. We do.
But not now.
And not here. He frowned. I don't understand. I told you, the toast was just. Nathaniel. I cut in gently. You didn't defend me. Not once. Not at dinner. Not at brunch. Not in 3 years of being part of your family's performance. His jaw tightened. I never asked you to be Alana, he muttered. No, I said. But you never stopped wishing I was. Silence. Then I walked to our bedroom, gathered the last of my things. A sweater, my grandmother's ring, a stack of books he never read. And on my way out, I placed the wedding photo face down on the console table. That was my goodbye. Polite.
Clean.
Irrevocable. That night, in my new apartment, I made tea. I lit a candle. And for the first time in 3 years, I slept in peace. Not in victory. Not in bitterness. Just peace. Because I had walked away before the toast turned me to ash. Because I had chosen me. 2 weeks passed. No contact. No flowers. No emails with half-hearted apologies from Evelyn or Nathaniel. Just nothing. And it was exactly what I needed. Because silence, real, uninterrupted silence, teaches you who you were when the noise of someone else's life fades. And who you still are once you remember how to breathe. I got up each morning and opened the windows of my tiny downtown apartment. Watched the sun pour in over the red brick buildings. Made tea in a chipped mug I bought in college. Walked barefoot on creaky wood floors. And slowly, I rebuilt rituals that didn't require anyone's approval. I started taking clients again. Editing manuscripts. Coaching first-time authors. Reading late into the night, and leaving notes in margins that mattered. One morning, a young woman named Dana sent me her first draft, a memoir about surviving emotional neglect in a picture-perfect family. I read it in one sitting, sobbing quietly at my desk. Then I wrote back, "This story is your fire escape. You don't need permission to climb it." As I hit send, I realized that was me too. Gabrielle came over with pastries and sarcasm. "Your skin looks clearer," she teased. "Is that freedom or exfoliation?" "Both," I laughed. "Mostly freedom." She walked around my studio, touching things. "You know what I love," she said. "Nothing here is theirs. No wolf fingerprints. No wolf toasts either," I smiled. She raised her coffee mug and tapped mine. To never being a placeholder again. I froze. Then tapped back. To being the headline. Meanwhile, Nathaniel was slowly slipping from public view. I still heard whispers. He was seen alone at his firm's gala. Evelyn posted throwbacks of Alana with captions like, "Some things never fade." Someone tagged me in a post where the Wolf family posed at a charity event. Alana was there, beaming. My spot on Nathaniel's right side was empty. I didn't feel rage. I felt pity. Because they didn't just lose me. They lost the only person in that family willing to bend without breaking. Then one Thursday morning, I received a letter. Handwritten. From Alana. Yes, that Alana. "Dear Serena, I debated writing this. But after the gala, after the things Evelyn said, I felt I owed you something. I left Nathaniel, for a reason. He's not cruel, not in obvious ways. But he floats. He adapts. He becomes what the room expects. And when that room demands silence from women, he doesn't protest. He blends. I knew it back then. You know it now. I'm sorry they used me to wound you. I didn't ask for it. I never wanted to be a ghost at your table. For what it's worth, you were braver than me. You stayed. You fought. You left. That takes more courage than walking away before the fire even starts. Alana. I read it twice, then folded it gently and placed it in my desk drawer. Not because it fixed anything, but because it reminded me the house may have toasted her, but she toasted me. Later that evening, I hosted my first dinner in the new apartment. Just 5 women, all editors, artists, and friends. We brought candles and cheap wine and too much bread. We talked about bad dates and good books, laughed until someone choked on red wine. And at one point, Gabrielle raised her glass and said, "To Serena, for building her own table." They all raised theirs too. And this time, I toasted back.
To joy. To peace.
To never being anyone's stand-in again. As the night wound down, I stood by the window watching city lights flicker. And I realized I was never meant to fit their table. I was meant to build my own. With my own rules, my own people, my own light. And no one, not even Nathaniel, could dim that again. You don't know how much weight you were carrying until it's gone. And one afternoon, as I stood in the sunlight of my small studio apartment, barefoot, hair messy, paint smudged across my wrist from helping a client sketch a book cover, I realized I was light. Not happy necessarily. Not healed completely. But light. Because I had dropped the weight of trying to be palatable. Trying to be chosen. Trying to be enough for a family who had already decided someone else wore the crown. But here's the thing about crowns. They're heavy. And the real ones, you make yourself. I launched something small. An online writing community, The Margin. A safe space for women to write the words they'd been told were too much. Too angry. Too raw. Too real. It started with 20 members. Then 200. Then 2,000. Soon we had women from 5 countries attending live workshops. A virtual stage for truth tellers who had been silenced at too many family dinners, too many boardrooms, too many marriages. And every time someone published their first essay, read a poem aloud through tears, or simply showed up with a trembling voice and a story to tell, I felt it. Purpose. Not performance. Not perfection. But power. And I didn't need Nathaniel or Evelyn to see it. Because hundreds of women did. Every single
Day.
Gabrielle came over with wine and a new lipstick shade she wanted me to try. We sat on the floor, legs crisscrossed, pasta in mismatched bowls. So, what happens if he shows up? She asked. I shrugged. Then he sees what I became while he wasn't looking.
She grinned.
You're going to kill him softly with this glow-up. I laughed. I'm not even angry anymore. Really? Really? I wasn't. Because somewhere between their toast and my escape, I had found something far sweeter than revenge. I had found my voice, and I wasn't lowering it again. Then came the call. Nathaniel. I didn't recognize the number. It was from a hotel. When I picked up, his voice was slower. Hesitant. Serena, he said. I saw the website. Your community. The Margin. Silence. It's incredible. I waited. He exhaled. You were always so quiet, I never realized how much you had to say. You never asked, I said. I know. More silence. I'm not calling to fix things, he continued. I think I broke what we had beyond fixing. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't expect that. Not really. But I also didn't feel anything in response. No flutter. No ache. Just closure. You weren't the only one, I said. They all broke it. I know that too. Then, the final words from him I'd ever hear. She never had what you have. None of them did. And I hope you never let anyone make you small again.
Click.
I never replied. Never needed to. Because by then I had moved on. Not just from him, but from the version of myself who waited to be chosen. Months later, The Margin hosted its first in-person retreat. A weekend in the Catskills. Rustic cabins. Bonfires. Journals by the dozen. We toasted each other over esmores and wine, raising glasses to courage and truth. And one woman, Claire, 58, graying at the temples and fierce in her stories, stood and said, I spent 30 years in a marriage where my silence was the price of peace. But Serena taught me that real peace doesn't cost your voice. So tonight I raise a glass, not to who we were, but to who we chose to become. Everyone clinked their glasses, and I cried, because this was my family now, chosen, messy,
Loud.
and full of light. That night I wrote something in my journal. They toasted his ex, but I built a room where 100 women toasted each other, and no one can take that from me. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, went outside, stood barefoot in the grass, watching the pink light stretch across the hills, and I whispered to no one in particular, "I'm proud of you," because that's what I had needed to hear. And now, I didn't need them to say it. I could say it to myself, and believe it. The letters started arriving 6 months later. Not emails, not texts, real, handwritten letters, the kind you touch with both hands. The first one came in cream-colored stationery with gold lettering. From Evelyn Wolf. I stared at it for 5 whole minutes before opening it. "Serena, we've heard about your work, about your organization. I must admit, it's impressive what you've done in such a short time. You were always different. I may not have understood it then, but I see now that difference is power. We're hosting a fundraiser for women in literature. I'd like to formally invite you to be our keynote speaker. Please consider it. The family would be honored to have you." I nearly laughed. The same woman who once said my poetry degree was artistic but not sustainable, who toasted her son's ex at my anniversary dinner, was now asking me to speak about empowerment?
No.
Absolutely not. I didn't burn the letter. I framed it, hung it right next to the first check the margin ever received. Proof that the same mouths that once whispered, "You don't belong here," would one day ask me to lead them. But that wasn't the only letter. Others came too. From cousins. From women who used to sit across from me at Wolf family brunches, perfectly polite with their pearl necklaces and passive insults.
Each note said something like,
"I always admired how you held yourself. You were never the problem. We just didn't know how to stand with you. You gave me courage." I didn't reply to most. Not because I was bitter. Because I didn't need their validation anymore. Their silence had already taught me everything. The margin grew. We secured grants, hosted panels, retreats, even partnered with schools for mentorship programs. One of our campaigns, titled "No More Toasts to Ghosts," went viral. It featured women sharing the exact moment they realized they were invisible in their own families, their own marriages, their own lives, and how they reclaimed themselves. The hashtag trended for weeks. One night, a woman sent me a video of her standing up at a Thanksgiving table, interrupting a toast to her brother's new girlfriend, the one everyone compared her to, and saying, "Tonight I toast myself for surviving a family that only claps for who they understand, and for finally walking away." She credited the margin. She credited me. And that meant more than anything Evelyn Wolf could write in gold lettering. Gabrielle and I celebrated at a rooftop bar downtown. She raised her glass, eyes gleaming, to Serena, for proving that sometimes the greatest revenge is not revenge at all. I finished, just refusing to stay small. We laughed, clinked glasses, and danced until the city lights blurred into stars. I didn't think of Nathaniel. Not really, except for one brief moment. When a song came on that used to play in his car, I closed my eyes, and instead of remembering his hand on the gear shift, I remembered my own, driving myself out of that life, alone,
strong, steady.
A few months later, I was invited to give a TED-style talk at a women's summit. Thousands of women in the audience. Stage lights warm on my face. I stepped up to the mic and said, "I was once the woman who smiled while her in-laws toasted someone else at her own anniversary dinner. I thought being silent was the price of survival. But silence didn't save me. Speaking did. Writing did. Choosing myself did." The applause was thunderous. And somewhere, in some Boston estate with cold chandeliers and untouched wine glasses, I hoped Evelyn heard it. I hoped Nathaniel heard it. Because I had become everything they were too afraid to be. Unapologetic, unbought, unbreakable. That night, I returned to my apartment, lit a candle, and as I opened my notebook, I saw the letter from Alana again, the one she had sent months ago. I reread it slowly, then added a final line at the bottom.
Thank you.
For walking away first. It taught me how. The next morning, I opened the windows again, watched the light pour in. I was still alone, still unmarried, still imperfect, but I was free. And no one was going to raise a glass to a woman I used to be, ever again. Because this time, the woman at the head of the table was me. And every word on that table?
Mine.